Hey everybody, it's your girl, Pretty Girl Tiff, and this is the Good, the Bad, and the Fucking Ugly podcast. All right, you guys, this week's episode is You Were Begging for the Bare Minimum. Okay, let's get into it. Have you ever celebrated something in a relationship that should have been just simply fucking standard? A text back, an apology, consistency, effort. If so, this episode is just for you and you and you. Okay. The hardest truth isn't that they gave you the bare minimum. It is that you started believing it was enough. Okay. Like we start with every podcast, it is good in everything. So why does this happen? We ask because we get into these hard truths and let's talk about some important things. Most people who end up accepting the bare minimum aren't weak. They're hopeful. Nobody walks into a relationship saying, I can't wait to be disappointed. Nobody says, I hope I spend the next year begging for communication, consistency, and effort. This is not how it starts. It starts with potential. It starts with chemistry. It starts with possibility. You meet someone and you see the things that they could be. You hear their dreams, you learn their story, you understand their strengths. And because you are a great person, you don't judge them by where they are today. You judge them by who they believe they can become. And this is where many of us get trapped because while we're falling in love with who they could be, you're ignoring who they actually are. Then we also think they'll eventually show the fuck up. At first, the inconsistency doesn't seem like a big deal. They cancel plans. Okay. They disappear for a few days. Okay. They don't always follow through, but you keep telling yourself they're just busy. They're just going through a lot. Once things settle, it'll get better. It won't get better. So you wait and you wait and you wait some more. Not because you're desperate, because you're hopeful. You believe eventually they'll become the partner that they've been promising you they were going to be. Also, they'll become more consistent. Many of us convince ourselves that consistency is coming. We think once they trust me more, once we become official, once they heal from their past, once life slows down, life never slows down, by the way, things will change. But here's the problem: potential is not a relationship, promises are not effort, future plans are not present actions. You cannot build a healthy relationship on things that haven't happened yet. You ask yourself, they'll love me the way I love them. I'm going to say that again. They'll love me the way I love them. This is where so many good hearted people get hurt because you love deeply, you check in, you communicate, you remember the little things, you make time, and you show up. And naturally, you assume that if you keep loving them well, they'll eventually return that same energy. But love doesn't work like a vending machine. You don't put in effort and automatically get effort back. Sometimes people enjoy being loved more than they enjoy loving. And that is a painful truth. You also ask yourself, the effort will eventually be matched. You start caring more than your share. You initiate the conversations, you plan the dates, you fix arguments, you keep the relationship moving. And because you're invested, you tell yourself, they'll meet me halfway eventually. But eventually turns into months, months turn into years, and before you know it, you've become responsible for keeping an entire relationship alive. Now, while we sit here and we listen to all these things, you may say, well, why do good people stay? It's simple. And let's just be honest. The people who often accept the bare minimum aren't selfish. They're compassionate. They're patient. They're understanding. They give second chances, then thirds, then tenths. They see potential where others see red flags. They believe people deserve grace, and those qualities are beautiful until they're used against you. Because there's a difference between being understanding and abandoning your own needs. There's a difference between giving grace and accepting negligence. There is a difference between loving someone and carrying them. But the truth is, you weren't asking for too much. You were not needy. You were not difficult. You were not impossible to love. You were simply giving someone the benefit of the doubt long after they stopped earning it. You tell yourself these things. At least they text me. At least they showed up. At least they apologized. And at least they called. but at least becomes dangerous because it becomes the standard. Remember this in this segment. You weren't asking for too much, you just got used to receiving too little. Okay, here we go. The bad part. I think the good was good. It was given, it was great. But the bad is we start shrinking ourselves and we start shrinking our needs. This is where things start to change. Not at once, not overnight, but slowly and quietly, almost without you noticing. Because someone repeatedly fails to meet your needs, you don't always leave. Sometimes you just adapt, which is true. Sometimes you shrink yourself. Sometimes you start asking for less and less because asking for what you actually need keeps leading to disappointment. You stop expecting consistency. You stop expecting communication. You stop expecting affection. And you stop expecting reassurance. You stop expecting respect. Not because those things stop mattering, but because every time you ask for them, you were made to feel like you were asking for too much. You will hear things like, "You're too sensitive." I heard that all the fucking time. All the time, I'm sensitive. And I'm not sensitive, I'm just passionate. I digress. You'll also hear, "Why are you making such a big deal out of this? You're always complaining," or "Nothing I do is ever enough for you." And eventually you begin questioning yourself, which is a human thing. You start wondering if maybe you really are too needy. Maybe you are expecting too much. Maybe your standards are unrealistic. But here's the truth, and I'm going to hold your hand. You ready? Okay. Wanting consistency is not needy. Wanting communication is not needy. Wanting honesty is not needy. Wanting effort is not needy. Wanting respect is not needy. Those aren't luxuries, those are relationship basic 101. Also, you begin to start walking on eggshells. One of the first signs something is wrong is when you become afraid to speak up. For me, I'm a non-confrontational person. I don't get a thrill out of arguing. I don't get a rise out of it. I hate arguing because I go from 0 to 100. So I'm like the Incredible Hulk, and it takes me a long time to turn back into Laretha, and I don't like that. And anybody who's ever had a confrontation with me can say there is Laretha, and then there's Laretha with the hard R, and you don't want Laretha with the hard R. I digress. So you start rehearsing conversations in your head before having them. You overthink every text. You analyze every word. You carefully calculate how to bring up your feelings without upsetting them. You spend more energy managing their reactions than expressing your own emotions. That's not peace. That is survival. A healthy relationship should feel safe enough for honesty. And if you're consistently afraid of how someone will react to your needs, baby, that is a problem. That is a problem. You also have a fear of bringing up things. You know something hurts. You know something feels off, but you stay quiet because every conversation becomes an argument. Every concern becomes a debate. Every feeling that you have becomes something that you have to defend. So instead of speaking up, you convince yourself, just let it go again and again and again until resentment start building where honestly should have been. Also, you begin to start over explaining your feelings. I do that. I'm the president of Over Explaining Your Feelings Club. I hold that honor. But that is the truth sometimes. Have you ever noticed how explaining your feelings to someone refuses them to understand how you feel? Have you ever thought about that? Like, I write paragraphs, I repeat myself, I give examples, I break things down in different ways. But yet again, you may try to make your pain make sense to someone who benefits from not understanding it. I can give somebody a reason why I'm mad A, B, C, and D. And somebody will still ask, why do you think you're mad? Or why do you feel the way you feel? I feel the way I feel because I gave you A, B, C, and D. That's it. That's it. And I think also, too, the more we explain, the more exhausting it becomes. That is a fact. If I'm telling you the sky is blue and you telling me the sky is green, and I'm giving my all to let you know the sky is blue, and you want to argue me up and down. I'm just gonna say 2 plus 2 is 4. That's it. If you want to say anything else, 2 plus 2 is 4. That's it. Because healthy communication doesn't require a courtroom presentation. The right person shouldn't be a PowerPoint presentation to understand where their behavior hurts you. Also, too, we start lowering our standards to avoid conflict. This is where the damage gets deep. You stop asking for what you deserve because it creates tension. So you just settle. You convince yourself, at least they're trying, right? At least they're here. But are they really? Nobody's perfect. And that's true. Nobody is perfect. Or things could be worse. Things could absolutely be fucking worse. But every compromise costs you something. Every excuse you make for someone else becomes a betrayal of yourself. Little by little, you begin accepting things you once promised you would never tolerate. Some of the signs of accepting the bare minimum, let's just be honest. You might be accepting the bare minimum if you are always texting first, always checking in, always making the plans, always initiating difficult conversations, always apologizing first. I raised my hand for that one. Carrying the emotional labor, carrying the relationship, and the biggest of all, you're feeling lonely while sitting next to someone who claims to love you. Sometimes loneliness is realizing you're the only one truly invested. Now, the hard truth about this, the relationship didn't become one sided overnight. It happened every time you accepted less than what you deserved. Every time you silenced your needs, every time you convinced yourself that crumbs weren't enough, and eventually you stopped recognizing yourself. Because shrinking yourself to keep someone comfortable always comes at a cost. The moment you start making yourself smaller to keep a relationship together is the moment you should ask whether the relationship is actually holding you together or slowly breaking you apart. Now, the ugly, the fucking ugly of this. The humiliation that nobody talks about because it's terrifying. This is where this gets uncomfortable for us to talk about. Because up until now, it's been easy to focus on what they have did. The inconsistency, the broken promises, the lack of effort, the missed signals, the disappointment. But the ugly part of this story isn't always what they did. The ugly part is realizing how much you accepted. And the truth that most of us don't want to sit with, because when the relationship ends or when the fog finally clears, you start replaying moments in your head, moments that make you cringe, moments that make you wonder, why the fuck did I stay? Why did I keep trying? Why did I ask for that in the first place? Not because you were judging your past self, but you're finally seeing the situation clearly. Begging for communication, let's just start here. We weren't asking them to move mountains. We weren't asking them to write poetry. We were not even asking for perfection. We were asking for a text back, a simple phone call, a conversation, basic communication. And somehow, even that felt like a negotiation. You found yourself saying things like, can you just let me know when you're busy? Can you just communicate with me? Let me know. Can you please stop disappearing? I'm going to read that again for the folks in the back. You find yourself saying these things like this is a negotiation. Can you let me know when you're busy? Can you just communicate with me? Can you please stop disappearing? You were begging someone to communicate in a relationship. That's not asking for too much. That's the fucking foundation. We beg for clarity. This came with confusion sometimes. You didn't know where you stood. You didn't know what they wanted. You didn't know if they were committed or not. You didn't know if they were staying. You didn't know anything because all you were begging for was clarity. And instead of receiving answers, you received vagueness, excuses, deflection, mixed signals. So you kept asking, trying to get committed to keeping things uncertain. We start begging for honesty. And honestly, this is the most painful part because deep down, many of us already knew something wasn't right. We felt it, we sensed it, we noticed the inconsistencies, But instead of honesty, we received half truths, avoidance, manipulation, and silence. The cruel part isn't being lied to. The cruel part is having to beg someone to tell you the truth when they already knew the truth. We were begging to be prioritized. You watch them make time for everything else: work, friends, social media, hobbies. Everyone seems to have access to their efforts except you. And somehow you kept explaining why you wanted more time, more attention, more consistency, more presence, as if your existence required a sales pitch. We started begging to be chosen. This is the wound beneath them all. This is the one that is the open sore. Most people aren't begging for text. They're begging for reassurance. They're begging for clarity. They're begging to feel wanted, to feel valued, to feel chosen. And there is questioning in that. And there is something heartbreaking about loving someone who continuously makes you question whether you matter or not. When y'all start feeling like crumbs start to feel like feast, this is where the humiliation shows up, and it shows up big. Not because you're weak, but because you've been deprived for so long that normal effort starts feeling extraordinary. You get excited over a good morning text. You feel relieved when they finally call. You brag to your friends because they remember something important. You praise them for doing things partners should already fucking do. And the scariest part, you generally start believing these moments are proof that things are improving. When really, they're just temporary interruptions in a pattern. The hard truth, you weren't asking for luxury treatment. You weren't asking for perfection. You weren't asking for a fairy tale. You were asking for basic human decency, respect, communication, consistency, consideration. The things every healthy relationship requires, the things that should never have required begging. Now, the mirror moment. This is where many people finally break. Not because they realize how little the other person cared, but because they realize how much they abandoned themselves trying to earn that care. How many times they ignored their instincts, how many times they accepted excuses, how many times they settle for less when they know they deserve fucking more. That, that realization hurts. But it's also where the healing begins because once you see it, it can't be unseen. The moment you have to convince yourself, someone to care, you've already lost. I'm going to read that again. The moment you have to convince someone to care, you have already lost. Not because you're unworthy, not because you're difficult, asking for too much, but because genuine care doesn't require consistent persuasion. The right people don't have to be talked into valuing you. And the moment you stop begging for what should come naturally, in the moment, you start remembering who the fuck you are. Now, the mirror moment. What we're really chasing. This is the part of the episode where we stop looking at them and we start looking at ourselves. Not to blame ourselves, not to shame ourselves, but to understand ourselves. Because healing doesn't begin when you figure them out. Healing begins when you figure out why you stayed, why you fought so hard, why you ignored what was obvious, why you kept returning to a situation that was slowly breaking your heart. And that, my dear, is a difficult conversation because sometimes it wasn't really about them. Sometimes it was about what they represented. You ask yourself in all of this, was it even love? A question many people avoid asking themselves: do I love them? Or did I love how I hoped that would make me feel? Because these are two very different things, two totally different things. Sometimes we become attached to the possibility of finally being chosen, finally being enough, finally receiving the love we always wanted. And then what happens, we stop seeing the person clearly. We start seeing them as the answer, the solution, the proof, and the validation. Then we start chasing validation because let's just be honest, many of us weren't chasing love. We were chasing confirmation. Confirmation that we were attractive enough, good enough, worthy enough, and important enough. We wanted someone else's effort to prove our value, someone else's commitment to prove our worth, someone else's love to prove that we were lovable. But here's the problem. If someone else's choice determines your worth, you spend your entire fucking life trying to earn things you already possess. The need to be chosen. For this is the deepest wound, worse than a heartbreak. It's rejection. Not enough without anyone actually saying the words. It's watching someone choose everyone and everything over you. And somewhere along the way, the relationship stops being about connection. It becomes about winning. Winning their attention, winning their affection, winning their commitment, and winning their approval. Because if they finally chose you, then maybe all your sacrifices were worth it. Maybe all your pain meant something. Maybe all the waiting wasn't wasted. But love never is supposed to be about compensation. You may ask yourself, why was I accepting less than what I deserve? And this is a question that everybody honestly should sit with. Not tomorrow, not next week, not 365 days from now, but today. You ask yourself, why was I accepting less than what I deserved? Why was I afraid to be alone? Why was I afraid of starting over? Why was I afraid nobody else would love me? Why was I afraid that leaving meant admitting that the relationship failed? Because sometimes we stay in painful situations not because they make us happy, but because we're terrified of what comes after. Now, this one I can honestly relate to because of my past. What was I afraid would happen when I walked away? What was the fear of me walking away? And now you can ask yourself and really think about it. What was the fear? Was it loneliness? Was it rejection? Was it embarrassment? Was it having to rebuild? In my opinion, and mine's only, because I can't speak for everybody, I think for me, it was loneliness for sure. Even though I'm introverted, I like people in spurts, just in spurts. Having to rebuild, that took the hardest pill after the divorce. I moved back in with my mom. She stays in Illinois, and all my work was in Missouri. So that was a very hard transition for me. I came from basically being on my own in my own space to being with my mom, my sister, my brother. I'll say my mom's, and it was hard. It was extremely hard. It was hard and humbling, but it was definitely very much. I had a hard time rebuilding because I literally started from scratch. Literally started from scratch. I didn't have any furniture. Like it was just hard. So I understand now. For me, that was one of the things that was like hard to do after everything was said and done. These papers were signed. I had to start over. And I think I have a way better appreciation for that because I did it on my own. Like, I didn't have to lay on my back to get where I'm at. I stood on my own 10 toes and got that shit. And I think for me, that's a pat on the back. Not everybody has the same story, and that's fine. But I do, when I wrote this script, I was very much aware of this will come up in it because this is the good, the bad, and the fucking ugly. And I'm going to tell my truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. At the end of the day, often the fear of leaving becomes bigger than the pain of staying. And that's when we become trapped, not by the relationship, but by our own fears. Then you start to question yourself, did I love them, or was the idea of finally being enough? This question changes everything. And I have to be honest, and I'm going to hold your hand, two hands. Because your self worth was attached to being chosen by them, then losing them feels like you're losing yourself. But you didn't lose yourself. You lost access to someone who couldn't give you what you needed. That is the difference. It's devastating, but it's the difference. One is devastating, the other one is freedom. And then we talk about the truth nobody likes hearing. Sometimes the person we're trying the hardest to convince wasn't them. It was ourselves. I know, right? I know. We kept collecting tiny moments of affection and using them as evidence, evidence that they cared, evidence that they could and would change, evidence that staying was worth it because accepting reality would have meant letting everything go. And letting go felt impossible. Here's the mirror moment, not for judgment, but just for growth. And take these little tidbits with you, these questions, and just ask yourself, just you and yourself. Sometimes I have the best conversations with myself. So here we go. What was I really chasing? Why did I stay longer than what I should have? What part of me believed I had earned love? What wounds was I trying to heal through this relationship? What am I refusing to admit? Those answers may hurt. They may also set you free because once you identify the wound, you can stop confusing it with love. Here's the thing, you kept trying to earn what should have been given freely. Love is not a reward, respect is not a prize, communication is not a bonus, consistency is not something you have to deserve. The healthiest relationship happen when two people show up willingly to give those things freely. And the moment you stop trying to earn basic fucking love, it's the moment you start believing you're worth receiving it. This is where the healing begins. So you may ask yourself, okay, Tip, what happens now? You didn't said all this, what happens? This is what happens when you stop begging. This is what happens. This is your comeback. You stop begging. This is where everything changes. Not because they finally changed, not because you finally chose you, and not because they suddenly became the person you needed to be. It changes because you do. The comeback doesn't begin when someone realizes your work. The comeback begins when you realize it. And that is completely different than anything else. That is a different kind of power. And that's completely for you. Because for so long, you've been living as if love was something that had to be earned, as if affection was a reward, as if respect was conditional, as if being chosen determined your value. But healing starts the moment you understand one simple truth. Love is not supposed to feel like a job interview. You are not supposed to spend every day trying to qualify for basic treatment. Yes, I put some bass in my voice because now this is it. You're not supposed to convince someone to see your value. The people who are meant for you won't need a presentation. They won't need persuasion. They won't need repeated reminders of what you bring to the table. Because I'm gonna let you know now what I bring to the table. I bring the table, the chairs, the dollies, the food, the candles. I bring it all. I am the table. Me, I'm the table. I'm telling you as Tip, I'm the table. That's it. So when you start having that kind of power, nothing can stop you. What else we're gonna stop doing is auditioning for affection. Just think about how exhausting it is. Always trying to be enough. Enough fun, enough patient, enough attractiveness, enough understanding, enough forgiving, enough accommodating. You became so focused on earning love that you forgot healthy love isn't earned, it's shared. Mutual, reciprocated. The comeback begins when you stop performing for acceptance. Another thing, you stop trying to earn respect. One of the biggest lessons you'll learn in this, respect isn't something another person grants you. It is something you require. You stop accepting excuses. You stop negotiating your standards. You stop explaining why basic decency matters. You stop lowering the bar just because a motherfucker refuses to rise to it. And suddenly, what once felt normal starts feeling unacceptable. We stop proving our worth. This is the one that's going to free us the most in our healing. The realization that your worth was never the issue. Their inability to recognize it wasn't proof that it didn't exist. A diamond doesn't become worthless because someone mistakes it for a rock. And you don't become less valuable because someone failed to appreciate you. The comeback begins when you stop seeing yourself through the eyes of people who couldn't see your value. We stop convincing people to choose us. This is where peace comes and this is where it lives. Because the right people choose you willingly, not reluctantly, not occasionally, not when it's fucking convenient, not when they're lonely, not when everyone else leaves. They choose you consistently. Has to be convinced to stay. They've already halfway gone. Now we talk our new standards. We talk about what healing looks like. Healing isn't about becoming cold. It's not even about becoming bitter. Healing isn't deciding you're never going to love again. Healing is creating new standards. Standards rooted in self respect, standards rooted in experience, standards rooted in knowing what you deserve. Consistency is normal, communication is normal, respect is normal, and most of all, effort is normal. Emotional availability, way fucking normal. And these aren't bonuses, these are not rewards, these aren't relationship luxuries. These are requirements. And once you realize that, you stop being impressed by people doing the bare fucking minimum. And then you'll look at yourself and look at the person that you have became. Something beautiful happens when you stop begging. You start to become more calmer. You become more confident. You stop chasing. You stop over explaining. You stop obsessing over mixed signals. And you stop settling. You stop trying to force connections that don't fucking fit or just don't work. And instead, you start paying attention to actions, patterns, consistency, and character because you've learned that words can promise anything, but behavior tells the truth. And in all of this, the relationship may have broken your heart, taught you something very valuable. You learn what happens when you abandon yourself for love. You learn what happens when you settle. You learn what happens when you confuse potential with reality. And now you know better. Not because you're bitter, but because you're wiser. A little bitty tip talk. Just a little one. And I want you to hear me when I say this. The right person won't make you beg for what naturally they want to give you. They won't make you fight for consistency. They won't make you beg for communication. They won't make you earn respect. They won't make you question your value every day. Because healthy love doesn't require consistent convincing. Healthy love shows up. Healthy love communicates. Healthy love chooses. And most importantly, healthy love doesn't make you beg. All right. Red flag of the week. Are you ready? Are you ready? Here we go. If someone only gives you enough attention to keep you around, but never enough to make you feel secure, they're benefiting from your loyalty while avoiding responsibility. I'm going to read that again for the folks in the back. If someone only gives you enough attention to keep you around, but never enough to make you feel secure, they're benefiting from your loyalty while avoiding responsibility. Okay? All right. I'm going to go back to my podcaster non-aggressive voice. If today's episode hit home, just remember this. You were never asking for too much. You were asking for too little from the wrong person. And the moment you stop begging for the bare minimum, in the moment, you make room for the kind of love that never required begging in the first place. That's the healing. And that's the version of you that deserves to win. All right, this is your girl, Pretty Girl Tip, and this is the good, the bad, and the fucking ugly podcast. Make sure you follow me on all my socials, TikTok, Twitter, X if you in the younger generation, Instagram and Facebook. Make sure you also follow on YouTube. And I'll see you guys next week. Love you. Bye.